So have you ever looked at an older adult and just thought, man, why are they so cranky? I mean, why do so many people reach the later stages of life looking like they are just totally done with the whole shebang? It is incredibly easy for us to sit back and judge, right? We tell them, hey, just be positive, or we assume it's their own fault they're bitter. But what if we've got it all backward? What if this bitterness isn't a flaw in their character? What if it's literally just the natural, logical result of life's glittering illusions finally wearing off?
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to dive into the anatomy of bitterness through the incredibly fascinating, if slightly pessimistic, philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer. We're going to map out this whole journey step by step. We'll start with the illusion of youth, move right into the trap of desire, figure out why pain outweighs pleasure, explore this concept of the shipwreck of old age, and finally, discover how this all leads to empathy for fellow sufferers.
Let's jump right in. Section 1. The illusion of youth.
To really understand the bitterness of old age, we actually have to rewind all the way back to the very beginning of the timeline, back to our youth. In those early years, life plays this fascinating trick on us. We're completely shielded from the darker realities of the world, just fully expecting this happily ever after outcome. As Schopenhauer famously noted, in early youth, as we contemplate our coming life, we're basically like children in a theater before the curtain is raised, sitting there in high spirits and eagerly waiting for the play to begin. Think about how idealistic you were when you were younger. You probably looked at the world, saw that the adults were messing it all up, and firmly believed, without a doubt, that your generation was going to be the one to clean up the mess. We genuinely thought we'd fix the world. Maybe it was just way too many Disney movies, or maybe children are just hardwired for hopeful thinking.
But here's the thing. Schopenhauer considered this ignorance a massive blessing. Why? Well, because if we truly understood what was coming our way, that youthful enthusiasm would be absolutely crushed. He actually viewed us as innocent prisoners, condemned not to death, but to life. If young people could somehow read the entire script of the play they're so eagerly waiting for, they'd realize that misery isn't just a rare exception. It's the inherent, unavoidable condition of being human.
Which leads us to Section 2. The trap of desire. So as we transition into adulthood, blissfully unaware of the tragedy ahead, we just plunge forward with these massive expectations. But inevitably, things don't quite play out the way we hoped. We start collecting painful experiences, and we carry them around like invisible weights. And right as we start asking ourselves, wait, where did I go wrong? We walk straight into a brutal psychological trap, the massive gap between expectation and reality. Think about your big firsts in life, your first time falling in love, getting your first car, maybe firing up your first gaming console. That first time, the emotional high is off the charts. It hits so hard, but with every repeated experience, that intensity fades. Meeting someone new later in life is just never going to feel exactly like that very first love. But here's the really dark twist. While the intensity of the experience fades incredibly fast, the agonizing desire for that high stubbornly sticks around. We just keep chasing the high of falling in love, even when we know it might lead to heartbreak.
So why do we do it? Why do we keep chasing these temporary pleasures that take a ridiculous amount of effort to get, only for them to fade away almost instantly? Schopenhauer points the finger at the ultimate culprit. He calls it the will to live. It's this irrational driving force within us that guarantees we are always desiring something. And the exact second we finally get what we want, boom, the novelty wears off, we get bored, and the will to live instantly sparks a relentless desire for something brand new. It's literally a treadmill we can never step off of, just endlessly chasing an illusion of lasting happiness that we are never actually going to catch.
All right, Section 3. Why pain outweighs pleasure.
Now we're taking a slightly darker turn in our explainer. As we pile up these disappointments, the optimists out there will usually push back. They'll say, come on, the joy in life ultimately outweighs the pain. Well, Schopenhauer completely rejected that idea. He pointed straight to the raw, brutal asymmetry of nature. Just imagine two animals out in the wild. One is actively eating the other. Schopenhauer asks a profound question here. Which of these two animals is having a more intense experience? Is it the predator who's experiencing the fleeting temporary pleasure of a nice meal? Or is it the prey experiencing the intense, enduring, absolute agony of being eaten alive? Obviously, the suffering of the prey carries immensely more weight. And when you apply that logic to human life, there are countless things that can make us scream in pure agony. But there are very, very few things that can overwhelm us with pleasure to that exact same extreme degree.
So the crucial takeaway for Schopenhauer here is that pain is an active, positive experience.
And by positive, he means it makes its own existence undeniably felt. Pleasure, on the other hand, it's mostly an illusion. Things like contentment, happiness, or even falling in love are basically just the temporary absence of pain. They're painkillers. When we fulfill a desire, we aren't gaining ultimate joy. We're just getting a brief window of relief before the suffering starts all over again. Philosophers who came after him totally agreed with this. Suffering just carries way more weight in the human experience than pleasure ever possibly could.
Section 4. The shipwreck of bitterness.
Now, imagine living inside that endless cycle for decades. By the time we actually reach old age, we've experienced a staggering amount of suffering, and a lot of it cuts so deep that we never truly bounce back. We've spent years, decades really, putting out fires, all under the guise of chasing happiness and fun, and we've been repeatedly burned in the process. Schopenhauer vividly describes the end of life as being shipwrecked, arriving in the harbor with your masts and rigging completely gone. You're just battered. After a lifetime of trying to find permanent happiness and failing over and over, people finally begin to see through the game. The illusions are completely gone. They realize life just means ongoing dissatisfaction with absolutely no permanent solutions. So knowing all of that, is bitterness really a surprise? Or is it literally just the natural result of a life that turned out to be painfully underwhelming?
Schopenhauer actually offers this incredible metaphor for this exact realization. He calls it the conjurer's booth. Imagine going to a fair and watching a magician perform. The tricks are dazzling, right? Well, the first time. But if you live long enough to sit in that booth and watch the exact same performance 2 or 3 times in a row, the deception stops working. You start seeing exactly how the tricks are done. The novelty is completely wiped out, and the whole effect is ruined. Those old magic tricks that used to promise lasting happiness, they just don't work on the elderly anymore. They've seen it all before.
And so we arrive at the logical outcome of bitterness. The sham is finally exposed. That play they eagerly waited for as children, it kinda sucked. The tickets were a total waste of money, and honestly, they feel ripped off. They've been riding this crazy emotional roller coaster with 0 safety bars, and the baggage they've accumulated along the way is just way too heavy to carry. Sure, they might still find minor, enjoyable moments here and there, but a tiny sliver of pleasure just isn't enough to provide relief from a literal lifetime of compounded misfortune. They just long for those days before the curtain was raised, back when their hope was actually still intact.
Which brings us to Section 5, Empathy for Fellow Sufferers.
Now, if we just stopped right there, this explainer would be nothing but totally crushing pessimism. But Schopenhauer's philosophy actually takes a really beautiful pivot here. Once all those glittering illusions of youth are stripped away, and once the trick of the conjurer's booth is completely exposed, it finally makes way for what he called the most necessary things in life: tolerance, patience, regard, and love of your neighbor. He concluded that our tragic human condition is actually the exact thing that clears the path for these vital virtues. It is precisely because life is so inherently difficult that these empathetic virtues become so absolutely necessary and so deeply understood by the people who have actually lived through the struggles.
A lifetime of accumulated pain and disappointment can definitely make us bitter, for sure. But simultaneously, it deepens our radical empathy for everyone else around us. We look around and suddenly realize that every single person we meet is carrying their own insanely heavy baggage. We aren't competitors in some silly game of happiness anymore. We are fellow sufferers. We realize that we are all in this broken, battered shipwreck together. And honestly, that shared tragedy is the ultimate foundation for genuine, profound human connection. Which brings us to our final thought. The next time you encounter an older person who seems a bit cranky or bitter, or even the next time you feel the sting of life's disappointments yourself, remember the conjurer's booth. Remember the shipwreck. We are all navigating the exact same stormy waters, driven by this relentless will, just searching for a little bit of relief. So, knowing this, how will you view the fellow sufferers in your own life? Will you judge them for their bitterness, or will you use this philosophical reality as a tool to unlock profound, radical compassion? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.